Good afternoon, everybody. I first want to thank the TLTF for the opportunity to speak to you guys for a few moments. My name is Isaac Goldman. I am the CEO of Vertican Technologies. I think we may be the only company here that focuses on the debt collection industry and specifically collections law firms. I think that at the very least makes us unique. I'm a third generation participant specifically in the ARM or the accounts receivable management space. My grandfather was a commercial collection attorney, and so he represented folks like Dun & Bradstreet, way back when Dun & Bradstreet was actually a lender before they were a commercial reporting agency for businesses. And so when my father was growing up, he worked in his father's law office. And one of the things that he used to lament about was that he had to write these court cost checks, and he would have to press really, really, really hard on the paper because they were 5-part checks with carbon, spacing. I don't know, it was way before I was born. But the concept is he had to work really hard to get the checks out the door, and they took one copy of the check and they would hand it to the court, and they would take another copy of the check and they would attach it to the file, and one went to the client. And my dad was taking computer science classes in college, and they bought a dot matrix printer and an IBM System 23, and my dad said we could write a little program that goes through all the counties in the state of New Jersey. There are 21 counties in New Jersey, 2 courts in each county, Special Civil Part and Superior Court, and we could go through and I could automatically print out the court cost checks. And they did that. And they literally wrote a program that said if you press 01, it would go to Atlantic County, and 02, Bergen County, Cape May County, Camden County, et cetera, et cetera. And then they got really fancy and they said, we're going to buy an IBM Selectric typewriter, and we're going to create merge documents using secretaries so that we don't have to write the same demand letter over and over and over again. That was in 1978. So because they realized that the letter was always like, dear debtor, you owe this much money, right? We represent this client, thank you so much. They actually put it into an IBM Selectric typewriter with a mag card reader, and it would stop at the merged words, and the secretary would then put in the first name, the last name, the debt amount, et cetera. And so from there, our first product was born. And so in 1979, my dad released a product called Collection Master and began servicing essentially contingency-based creditors' rights attorneys all across the United States. And there was this moment in time where I back up for a second. I spent my entire life telling anybody who listened that I was never going to get into my dad's business, right? It wasn't because of any level of animosity or anything like that. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I went to school. I studied philosophy, German idealism, and economics, and figured that one day I would grow a beard and move to a mountain somewhere and write a book and change the world. But I figured out that I actually can't grow facial hair, and I'm not that good of a writer. And so I was sitting in a hotel with my dad one day, and it wasn't for a money thing. But I made this casual comment to him where I said, for every $1 that you've put in your pocket, you've probably left 3 on the table. And he kind of looked back at me and was like, who are you? You're just this kid who's in college who read, some book recently and now thinks that they know, everything. And he wasn't completely wrong, but he wasn't completely right either. And so I started to look at our business differently and said, I started to look at his business, I should say, differently and say, if we started to invest in the areas where you have not invested in, what could that look like, right? What other value could we be providing the customers with, and how can we take a legacy business and kind of turn it into a modern and a contemporary business? And I heard somebody else here say, I'm going to steal 2 lines. I was here this morning. One of the other founders said, legacy doesn't mean that it's old and bad. It means that it's well loved, right? It's what's already been adopted, right? It's like those Microsoft Words and the Excels. And so our software in the collection space is legacy in that we dominate that market. The majority of the customers that are collecting on creditors' rights are using our platform, and so it's legacy in that sense. I also go on to say that we are not an overnight success, right? We are not one of these growth companies that has a 200% CAGR. In fairness, until I met Gordon 6 months ago and got invited to this conference, I didn't know what CAGR was. But the good news is that I went to the session yesterday on how to talk to private equity, and so I've got all the lingo down. I now know all the 3-letter acronyms, and I'm super ready to rock and roll. But what happened is we came into the business and the other thing is, after watching like 15 of these presentations, I realized this is like the worst deck ever, and if I come back next year, I'm gonna redo this entire deck, which is why I'm like actively not clicking this button. But I will eventually. I'll just do it really fast so you guys can't see. But what happened was we started to look at the business and realize that, at least in the collection space, like we were the system of record, right? So like we are like this nucleus. I'm going to press the button now, and we sit in the middle of our customers' operating systems. And collections, I assume in other areas of law, is an incredibly manual process, but it's also super high volume. And so when I come to conferences like this outside of my world, and I talk to people and I say things, I only have 37 seconds left. Is that right? Yeah, man. Anyway, we sit in the center. There's a lot of manual work that goes in. So, like my customers, in difference to what else is happening out in other areas of law, is they're super high volume. So my average customer is processing about 18,000 lawsuits every single month. My average customer also has about 120 seats, and only out of those 120 seats, they're going to have about 6 or 7 lawyers. And so they are paper and data factories, right? Placements are coming in from creditors. They are loading those into the system, and they are turning them into lawsuits as fast as humanly possible. Once they're into lawsuits, they're seeking judgment as quick as they possibly can. In most jurisdictions, they're actually going to go out and get a default judgment because the consumer is not going to want to talk to them because it's already been through an incredibly difficult and laborious collection cycle by the time it actually reaches the lawyer's desk. And once they get a default judgment, they're going to go ahead and they're going to attach an asset onto it. The most common assets that they're going to attach are going to be wage garnishments. 80% of all collection cases are resolved through wage garnishments. They're also going to look for things like bank accounts, planes, trains, automobiles, cars, all of those cool things. And so I tell you all of this because that requires this immense amount of manual work. And so starting in about 2014, 2015 on my last slide, a lot of the lawyers realized that instead of building and investing in technology, they were going to go figure out where they can get the labor done in the cheapest possible way. So rather than having paralegals that were making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, they found outsource companies in India and the Philippines and in Mexico where they could use BPOs or business process outsourcing companies, and they are sending all of this manual work that is like adjacent to and part and parcel of the CRM, but it's being done by humans outside of the system. And so specifically, I have law firms that are getting 8 and 10 and 15,000 checks every single month, and they're coming in as manual pieces of paper. And rather than having somebody sit and sort through that in the United States, they take them all into a high volume scanner, they scan them into one large PDF, and they send it off to a shop in India. And then, tens, dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people in India go through and they look at the docket number and they look at the case number and the date and the name, and they go and they update the system. And so that's kind of where the world has been for us. And so the way that we see our future is, I think we have some more label growth. We grow at around 20%. We have more label growth in our space. And we're definitely increasing in our wallet share. And I think that the wallet share that we're going to start increasing in the most is through displacing these existing BPOs that our customers are already using, because AI has the ability to do things that humans can do, which we've learned all about since we've been here. And we're beginning to explore and develop those capabilities into our software. Contingency-based firms, they've always made their money through efficiency, right? They're only getting a percentage of the total amount of dollars that they collect. We think that we're positioned to scale as a business. Our clients are getting a massive ROI, right? So some of our debt buyers are getting as much as 90% return on their investment in our actual software. And when I got here yesterday, I sat down with somebody and they said, "Why did you come to the TLTF?" And it was a really interesting question because I'm usually very intentional about what I do and how I do it, and I really couldn't answer the question. Like, we're not here to raise money, but we're not here to sell our company. And I think that we're here to seek strategic partnerships and to really just learn more about the legal market and learn from all of you. I have found this to be like just an immensely educational process. I love learning about legal recruiting software. I'm like super interested in learning about the Domino's pizza tracker, all the Harvey things that we did that were presented beforehand. The AI has been enlightening, and we're going to take all that back to the shop and figure out like how do we use this technology, how do we use this latest technology that we all have access to displace some of the manual work that's being done in our very small sliver of the legal tech world, and how do we maximize that to create more enterprise value for our business. When we look at our business, we think that there's this massive white space opportunity. I mean, I certainly do, and it's kind of the pitch that I gave to my dad, almost 12 years ago at this point. And if you're wondering, I'm not over time. When I made that comment, they'd actually reset the clock. So I just want to be very clear about that. I thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you very much.